Hello, this is Dr. Garrett Castleberry, Professor of Media Production and Communication at Mid-America Christian University, instructor for our course, Mass Communication Perspectives, or as it's sometimes also written, Mass Media Perspectives. That is, of course, because this class has this shared history between two fields of interest, communication studies and media studies, or media production as it's now often referred to under our media production and communication banner. Well, this course, as we've talked about, has focused on the scholarly side of things. Instead of building a project that might be a piece of audio media or a piece of multimedia storytelling of some kind, or a type of marketing project, or a kind of interview or interview synthesis, we have been working on that traditional scholarly essay. And the scholarly essay has a rich raison d'etre, reason for being, and hopefully, even amidst the struggles and trials of putting your ideas to paper, you have found some resolve and are feeling better about the shape that your project is in. Well, we want to take space in week 5 to both complete those major assignments, also reflect on them and report on them. And so I want us once again to tie in video discussion to those larger needs in the course. But let's pause for a second and just appreciate where these projects might show up. Where does an essay go after it is completed? Now, once upon a time, I think many disciplines and many essays are written for their own sake, for the pursuit of the grade, for the completion of the course. And there's nothing wrong with that type of ends objective, but I believe we can aspire for greater utility for these kinds of projects. One of the ways in which we encourage majors, that is to say students in the major, in the common media major, is to remind them that if you ever have interest in an advanced degree of some kind, that is to say completing your undergraduate degree, at some point picking it back up and working toward a master's degree, there are any number of challenges just getting into a master's program, among which include a writing sample. Often you'll have, it could be either filing or applying not only to become a graduate student, but to become, say, a graduate assistant or a teaching assistant or research assistant and so on. There are various roles that you could have within certain organizations to be able to gain additional compensation for that pursuit of an advanced degree. But one of the things they ask for very often is a writing sample. That's one of the reasons that traditionally grad schools used to wholesale require the GRE. That is equivalent to, it's kind of that next level of the SAT or the ACT that students typically take to help gauge their viability for undergraduate university or college entrance. The GRE does the same thing for graduate schools. And while, yes, you can find plenty of colleges these days that have some flexibility, and that's a good thing, by the way. Writing samples can help secure our placement, kind of edge out maybe even the competitiveness that you possess. And so it's good to have a couple of pieces of strong writing in our portfolio, whether public or private, that we can utilize to help make the case that we possess certain qualifications. Those can also be great tools to have in place if you're entering the workforce. And you don't have to be working in media or communication, whatever that is, to be able to, or maybe to be asked to submit requisite writing samples. That many positions want to know that you're a confident and competent communicator. And communicator isn't just about what we say out loud, isn't just how we articulate ourselves in spoken word, but it's so much more often how we can articulate ideas in written form. And thus we see a larger utility for the scholarly essay, what can be a scholarly essay. But also what we do with it can have different purposes. I mentioned something really important that I think relates to the majority, to use either to help advancement into an advanced degree or to help advance your case for employment. But there is also that means to an end of writing itself. And so not only may projects like the one you've been working on be a qualifier for something like submitting to competitive writing, but I want to talk about, what does that even mean? What does that look like? And where would I send it? Well, you could think about your field of interest or something related to maybe the topic you've spent time on. And there are conferences that would specialize in that information, in that knowledge arena. And so submitting to a conference would be one way to make use of your scholarly writing piece, but another would be, quite frankly, to look for a home for it. Maybe that means adapting it. Maybe that means shifting or altering the way it's worded or structured or things like that. But a piece of writing has its own currency and can be used in different ways. So take, for example, something like digital journalism. Now, many of you all are old enough to remember the kind of Web 1.0 into early Web 2.0 formats of the internet, where websites were places where people would, quote unquote, surf. They would go to, they would spend time. What would we do? We would read. We would read about things. We would learn about things. And what keeps attention on a website longer? Good writing, interesting writing, creative writing. And so birthed out of that interest and that need for good writing, the movement of blogs in the 2000s. Now we're far removed from that. I think the blogs evolved into vlogs, and then the vlogs have kind of merged into so much of the social media traction that we now engage in. But journalism's still fighting for space, and in fact we need good journalism, but we need good media criticism. Some of you all may be engaged in media criticism, others may be involved in something adjacent to that, something that could be either from your original discipline and just incorporating media as a focus point, right, as an artifact under analysis. And then some of you all are just kind of figuring out what it means to analyze a media artifact. What does it mean to form a more holistic assessment of something, not just a hot take, not just an opinion. In fact, those things, there's a reason Twitter would be a popular place, and maybe a Facebook page would be a place where you can just toss out an instant idea on something. Well, it's kind of like, think about the things that are instant, right? Maybe you put something in the microwave that is kind of warmed up in an instant, and that can temporarily satisfy you, but we all know it tastes a little weird, and it maybe doesn't possess all of the requisite nutrition. Writing can be the same way, and scholarly writing is much more like sitting down at that white tablecloth restaurant for a heartier meal that maybe has multiple courses in it, and it's intended to be a lot more nourishing, but also just a lot more of an enjoyable experience. That's what scholarly writing can be, and it can be that for you whether you're a media critic or not, right? We understand the majority of you aren't necessarily considering yourselves media critics, junior scholars, and so on, but that does not discount the value of the exercise and journey that we've been on together. So, this is my longest lead in yet. So for the culminating conversation that we're having asynchronously in this course, Comm 3603, We want you to talk about that journey, talk about your process. Maybe the process involves what ideas you were tinkering with, how it evolved into a thesis, what or where the research process led you, and ultimately what were a couple of takeaways. All right, so we'd like you to simply reflect on the process of working through the media project and try to avoid the easy outs, the pitfalls of simply falling into, well, I like this, I didn't like this. I like this, I didn't like this. I didn't like that. Because that's a less rewarding way of looking back on it. There will always be parts about the process that could frustrate us, could challenge us, but unpack that for us, right? Unpack some of those hurdles and ways you work through the project. And I will give us one alternative in closing. Love to hear about your journey as your video discussion 5 for week 5 in Comm 3603. However, if you're willing to expand your audience and maybe work to get it done at least 2 days prior to that day 7 final course deadline, if you would be willing to instead submit your final video presentation, so look at the assignment 2 for this week. If you're willing to submit that more formal and tailored and prepped final video presentation as your video discussion, I will consider them the same presentation video as 2 separate grade entries, right? So I know that directions for that specify it is not video discussion 5 because we wanted to have the space to be able to do different things with that. However, I'm interested in rewarding the hard work that others have put in, and also I'm interested in helping elevate your audience and elevate your voice as you grow stronger in your ability to articulate your ideas in front of others. That is to say, a double reward mechanism. If you want to simply submit your final video presentation of your project and read those directions carefully, because there are some time limitations on that and things like that. There might be some visual aid requirements and so on. But if you want to host that video also in the video discussion feed, I will count that both as the final presentation grade, and I will assess it separately, distinctly, as video discussion 5, so long as we're still participating in the peer response process and giving our audience, our classmates, our peers a chance to be able to see that. So that might mean moving a few things around to get that in. All right, went a little over on time, but it's the culmination of the course, and we're very excited about how hard everyone's been working, the ideas you've been putting together, and honestly, when you put that much labor into a thing, as great as it feels just to hit send when you're finally done, or at least finally ready to say goodbye to the thing for the sake of the class and moving on, I think there's something even greater to be rewarded in terms of sharing with others, being able to view and listen and hear about how people did things that were both similar and yet also distinct, maybe even different than your own process. And so anytime you have a course where students are coming in from different disciplines, we can't expect that these papers, these projects are all going to look incredibly similar. And there's a structural similarity that they all should possess. Yes, should have an introduction, should have thesis statements, they should have a literature that kind of sets up an understanding of the background of the problem or the way things are, or the artifact that they're examining. then some analysis of it, and then what we call a discussion or kind of concluding thoughts on that conclusion to the essay. But there could be some nuanced differences, and ultimately I do think we benefit from one another. So you have two choices, two roads, and how you want to finalize your week 5 video discussion. You can walk us through your journey of putting it together, some takeaways along the way, things you've learned, challenges presented, or simply submit in a public way that final presentation that you are already required to submit privately to the Dropbox. So by that, I would then encourage people, don't try, if you are submitting your final project, don't record that on Canvas. I think it's worthy enough. We don't want large files being uploaded to Canvas, but rather put that on YouTube, make it unlisted, no one can see it, no one can even access it without a link, and then embed it into Canvas. And that way it's archived there for your later purposes, but people can get to it easily through the embed process or hyperlinking, right? But if you can embed it, that's a good skill set to have too. All right, that's enough for now. Excited about you all sharing your work, sharing your process, and sharing your project with us to culminate this course experience, Comm 3603, Mass Communication, Mass Media Perspectives.